In eastern Afghanistan, an ancient Buddhist inscription was discovered carved into a rock, reading, Namo Obodo, Namo U, Namo U. For centuries, Buddhists have recited various versions of this formula to express devotion and take refuge in the three jewels of Buddhism: the Buddha, his teachings, Dharma, and the Buddhist community, Sangha. However, linguists note that this inscription is not written in a traditional Buddhist liturgical language like Sanskrit or Pali. Instead, it is a rough transliteration of Sanskrit into Greek, more precisely into Greco-Bactrian, using a Hellenistic script based on the Greek alphabet. The Greek letters on the stone are difficult to distinguish due to their cursive style, though some, like omega, can still be identified. This raises the question, how did a Greco-Bactrian Buddhist come to carve a Hellenized version of a Sanskrit mantra in Afghanistan? This cultural fusion is largely attributable to Alexander the Great, king of Macedon, whose vast empire stretched from Greece to the Indus River. Along the way, he Hellenized local populations, introducing the Greek language, philosophy, and urban lifestyle. Yet cultural exchange was not one-sided. The Buddha had died roughly 100 to 150 years before Alexander's arrival, and by that time, the relatively new religion of Buddhism was already spreading into the same region, leading to a unique synthesis known as Greco-Buddhism. This prompts further inquiry into what is known about ancient Greeks who adopted Buddhism. Cultural exchange between the Greek Mediterranean world and the territories of modern-day Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Northwestern India began as early as the 500s BCE. The Greek historian Herodotus mentions a Greek explorer named Skylax, who undertook an expedition for the Persian ruler Darius I, sailing down the Indus River through the Arabian Sea to Susa. Archaeologists have also uncovered numerous Greek coins circulating in the region, indicating that trade between these areas flourished long before Alexander's arrival. After his conquest, waves of Greek-speaking immigrants from the eastern Mediterranean settled dozens of new cities built in the Greek style, often bearing familiar names. Anyone familiar with Greek or Roman history will recognize cities like Antioch and, of course, the many Alexandrias. Some scholars suggest that the archaeological site of Ai-Khanoum in Afghanistan was one such Alexandria, Alexandria on the Oxus, founded by Alexander's general Seleucus on the Oxus River flowing through Central Asia. Although the identification of this city is debated, historians regardless refer to Ai-Khanoum as a bastion of Hellenism. It possessed all the hallmarks of refined Greek life: a theater, a gymnasium, and Greek columns everywhere. This Hellenistic influence extended beyond architecture. Archaeologists have also found evidence of Greek religion and philosophy at the site. The gymnasium was dedicated to the god Hermes and the hero Heracles. A papyrus fragment containing Greek philosophical texts was unearthed, and a local politician even inscribed several maxims from the Delphic oracle on his tomb. As historian Yorgos Kallias notes, these were not mere trading posts or military garrisons, but thriving Greek cities that formed powerful Hellenistic kingdoms. Initially dominated by the Seleucid Empire, the region saw King Diodotus I break away to establish his own independent kingdom, which historians call Greco-Bactria. In the 2nd century BCE, the Greco-Bactrians expanded into what is now southern Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northwestern India, founding dynasties known as the Indo-Greek kingdoms. These kingdoms were ethnically diverse, with descendants of Greek-speaking Mediterranean settlers integrating with Indians, Persians, and other Central Asian peoples. Greeks adopted Indian names, and Indians adopted Greek ones, accompanied inevitably by religious exchange. A fascinating example of possible Buddhist-Greek interaction involves the philosopher Pyrrho of Elis. Pyrrho traveled to India as part of Alexander's entourage. Yes, Alexander did bring philosophers along on campaign, presumably because existential debates are always welcome on the battlefield. Greek sources report that Alexander and his mobile philosophical corps spent considerable time engaging with Indian philosophers, deliberately seeking audiences with them. Some of these may well have been Buddhists. Pyrrho himself spent months, possibly years, in northwestern India, including in the city of Taxila in modern-day Pakistan. According to the Greek biographer Diogenes Laertius, it was there that Pyrrho encountered India's gymnosophists, the so-called naked wise men, an experience that led him to embrace the noblest philosophy. We do not know exactly who these naked wise men were. They likely belonged to an Indian ascetic community. They may not have been Buddhists, though many scholars believe they were. Regardless, upon returning home, Pyrrho developed a philosophical system that sounded strikingly Buddhist. To complete Diogenes' quote, "This encounter led Pyrrho to adopt a philosophy characterized by agnosticism and suspension of judgment. He denied the existence of anything honorable or dishonorable, just or unjust, and thus concluded that nothing truly exists." In other words, Pyrrho advocated radical detachment from the judgments and dualities that distort perception. One of Pyrrho's followers, Timon, added further layers to this preserved fragment. Pyrrho argued that things are equally undifferentiated, immeasurable, and indefinable. Therefore, neither our senses nor our opinions can reveal truth or falsehood. Consequently, we should not trust them in the slightest, but remain impartial, disinterested, and unmoved. Many have noted that this sounds like an extreme form of skepticism. Pyrrho essentially claimed we cannot trust our senses or reasoning, and thus should avoid dogmatic beliefs about the nature of reality. However, scholars emphasize that his ideas resemble not just general philosophical skepticism, but specifically early Buddhist thought, particularly the Madhyamaka school, traditionally founded by the Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna. The Madhyamaka school developed philosophies about the nature of reality, especially the concept of sunyata, or emptiness, the idea that all phenomena lack inherent existence. This closely parallels Pyrrho's assertion that nothing truly exists. Moreover, both Madhyamaka and Pyrrhonian thought employed a logical tool known as the tetralemma. Unlike a dilemma, which offers two options, a tetralemma presents four. A proposition may be true, false, both true and false, or neither true nor false. The tetralemma is common in Indian philosophy, so its appearance in Pyrrho's thought is notable. Pyrrhonian texts also state that the ultimate goal of suspending judgment is to achieve ataraxia, a state of serene calmness that some compare to the Buddhist concept of awakening. By relinquishing fixed beliefs and acknowledging the uncertainty and contradictions inherent in all truth claims, one can remain undisturbed by the world's flux. These parallels led Nagarjuna himself to call Pyrrho the Buddhist of Greece. It should be noted that this connection has not been definitively proven, and critics point out that the Madhyamaka school emerged several centuries after Pyrrho. Yet many scholars argue that the similarities with early Buddhist philosophy are too numerous to be mere coincidence. In the centuries following Alexander, Buddhism spread through these regions, aided by one of the most renowned Buddhist emperors in history, Ashoka of the Mauryan dynasty, who ruled nearly the entire Indian subcontinent from approximately 268 to 232 BCE. Like many historical figures whose legend outgrows reality, later generations spun fantastical tales about him. For a long time, these were all we knew, until 1837, when the Brahmi script was deciphered. Suddenly, historians gained near direct access to Ashoka himself through his edicts. In one inscription, he declares, "You know how great is my reverence and faith in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha." Note the phrasing of the three jewels. Ashoka appears to have been less interested in conquest and more in conversion, at least after a turning point. He may have undergone a dramatic conversion himself. In several edicts, he expresses remorse for ordering the slaughter of tens of thousands during his military campaigns. One edict states, "Ever since, compassion and sorrow have overtaken him, and he has been deeply grieved by his actions." After embracing Buddhism, he reportedly sponsored missionary activity throughout his empire and beyond, even sending emissaries as far as the Mediterranean. The Dharma has been repeatedly conquered by Ashoka, both here and among all bordering peoples, he writes, naming Hellenistic kings like Antiochus II of Syria and Ptolemy II of Egypt. If he is not exaggerating, this means Buddhist missionaries were engaging with Egyptians and Greeks by the 3rd century BCE. In the same edict, he adds that Greeks living closer to his realm had also converted. Similarly, here in the king's territory, among the Greeks everywhere, people follow Ashoka's instructions in Dharma. These edicts were multilingual, with Aramaic and Greek translations placed side by side, and historians believe they were specifically crafted to disseminate Buddhist ethics among the Hellenic populations of Asia. We also see hints that Buddhism was being reinterpreted for a Greek-speaking audience in another inscription. The concept of Dharma was rendered into Greek as eusebeia. Like Dharma, eusebeia is semantically rich, meaning piety, reverence for the gods, or filial respect. Ashoka's Greek translators apparently chose this term as the best way to convey the Buddha's message. Ashoka called his efforts the conquest by Dharma, and even mentions a special government rank, Dharma commissioners, likely officials who traveled to help establish Buddhism in major cities. These efforts appear to have borne fruit. One edict mentions those devoted to Dharma among the Greeks and Persians, indicating early Greek conversions to Buddhism. Among them stands out King Menander, widely regarded as the most famous Greek to adopt Buddhism, according to historian Olga Kubaka. However, the situation is complicated by the possible existence of two kings named Menander. Menander I, who ruled an Indo-Greek kingdom from 165 to 130 BCE, and a later Menander II, possibly his grandson. Nevertheless, King Menander is the central figure in the early Buddhist text Milinda Panha, The Questions of Milinda, dated to around 100 CE. This philosophical dialogue features King Milinda, generally identified with Menander I, and a Buddhist monk named Nagasena. In the text, Menander plays the skeptic, posing numerous questions about Buddhism to Nagasena, who skillfully answers each one. In the end, Menander decides to convert. While this account is likely legendary, other evidence supports the general outline. An Indo-Greek king named Menander did embrace Buddhism. For example, the Shinkot reliquary, a round stone vessel found in northern Pakistan, allegedly once contained a casket with ashes. An inscription on the lid mentions the reign of Maharaja Menander, the great King Menander, and states that it holds bodily relics of the Lord Shakyamuni, the Buddha himself. This inscription offers limited information and does not definitively prove Menander was a practicing Buddhist, but it suggests his relationship with Buddhism went beyond mere admiration, perhaps even patronage. Menander likely commissioned such reliquaries and donated stupas, monumental structures, to house them, possibly to gain public favor, bolster moral authority, or strengthen his legitimacy as ruler. Most scholars identify this Menander with Menander I, whose fame reportedly reached the Mediterranean world. Plutarch notes that Menander I died in a military camp, and his ashes were evenly distributed among several cities and enshrined in memorials, a term scholars interpret as referring to stupas. If Plutarch is correct, this lends credibility to the idea that Menander I embraced Buddhism and may have even attained the exalted status of an awakened being, with his Buddhist subjects venerating his relics. By Menander's reign, Buddhism was evidently taking root among Indo-Greek elites. His son, Strato, minted coins identifying himself as Dharmika, a follower of Dharma. Over the centuries, we see further evidence of religious syncretism or hybridization. For instance, a coin of Menander II depicts Zeus seated beside the goddess Nike, alongside the Dharma chakra, the eight-spoked wheel of Dharma, symbolizing Buddhist teachings. Historian Yorgos Kallias, mentioned earlier, argues that Indo-Greek religious outlooks may have facilitated this syncretism. He notes, "For the most part, the Indo-Greeks followed multiple Hellenistic and foreign cults, so the adoption of the Buddha as a hero cult figure would have posed little difficulty, along with all the ritual practices accompanying everyday Buddhism, reciting prayers, propitiating deities, venerating relics, and so on." The term Greco-Buddhism is also sometimes applied to an artistic movement, though modern historians critique this terminology. Scholars have long observed that ancient Buddhist art from Gandhara, covering modern northwestern Pakistan and northeastern Afghanistan, appears influenced by Greek artistic methods, and may even have been created by Greek artists. For example, Buddhist sculptures depict the Buddha or the Bodhisattva Maitreya with realistic features and draped in garments resembling those in Greek statuary. In the early 20th century, French scholar Alfred Fouché coined the term Greco-Buddhism for these sculptures, claiming, "All these technical details strikingly point to the hand of an artist from some Greek workshop." In essence, Fouché argued that only Greeks could produce such masterpieces. This claim is, of course, inaccurate. Local artists were certainly capable of such work, and historians have since debated how to characterize this art. Olga Kubaka argues that while we cannot rule out Greek artisans, their precise role is impossible to quantify. Other researchers note that many such sculptures date from a century or more after the fall of the Indo-Greek kingdoms, making it more likely they resulted from later interactions with the Roman Empire, either through local artists imitating imported Roman art, or Roman artists relocating to Gandhara to fulfill prestigious commissions from wealthy local patrons. Despite these complexities, it is undeniable that Buddhist art of this period actively borrowed imagery from Greco-Roman traditions. Notable examples include figures resembling Heracles and the goddess Tyche. These characters frequently appear in Kushan dynasty art, with their iconography adapted to represent local deities or bodhisattvas. For instance, the bodhisattva Vajrapani is often depicted in the likeness of Heracles. Vajrapani is revered as the Buddha's protector and companion, and artists clearly drew on Heracles, the powerful hero, to convey Vajrapani's role as guardian. Similarly, local goddesses like Ardoksho and Hariti are sometimes shown with attributes of the Greek Tyche, holding a cornucopia or a ship's rudder. Such examples are often labeled syncretism, a term usually understood as the blending of distinct religious traditions. Yet this definition is often overly simplistic. It implies two separate, monolithic entities, Hellenistic culture on one side, Buddhism on the other, merging like a Venn diagram. In reality, ideas, practices, and artistic expressions from different cultures intertwine in complex, asymmetrical ways. In recent years, scholars have preferred to describe syncretism as a process of indigenization or localization, wherein local cultures actively reinterpret foreign elements through their own conceptual frameworks and idioms. The Greek translator who chose to render Ashoka's Dharma as eusebeia was engaging in syncretism, not by merging systems, but by making sense of a foreign concept in his own terms, quite literally in his own Greek word. Compare this to the inscription mentioned at the beginning. The person who carved it chose not to translate the mantra into Greco-Bactrian words, but used Greco-Bactrian letters so the mantra could still be read and recited. Pronunciation and intelligibility mattered more than semantic meaning, much like modern Christians singing Hallelujah without knowing its original Hebrew meaning. Thus, Greco-Buddhism stands as a vivid example of the often deliberate and selective adaptation that occurs when cultures meet.